most people say, look, this kind of hyper polarized political debate, we don't want to have that in Europe.
I'm Eric Wilson, managing partner of Startup Caucus, the home of campaign tech innovation on the right. Welcome to the Business of Politics show. On this podcast, you're joining in on a conversation with entrepreneurs, operatives, and experts who make professional politics happen. Today, we're joined by my friend Juri Schnöller, all the way from Berlin. He's co-founder of Cosmonauts and Kings, Germany's premier digital political communications agency. He's worked on campaigns for the likes of German Chancellor Angela Merkel and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. Juri is at the cutting edge of innovation in EU politics and has also recently launched his own software platform, Civical. In our conversation, we talk about the differences between U.S. campaigns and European campaigns, what he's learned from the U.S. 2022 midterms, and how he drives innovation in German politics. Juri, you've been involved in political campaigns around Europe, and you watch campaigns very closely in the US. What's a difference between European and American campaigning that only a professional might appreciate?
First of all, what American campaigners often focus most of their time on, of course, for those who are listening, is email list building, fundraising, and the entire let's say campaign machine is mostly built around mobilization and expanding your list in order to increase the fundraising that is required to meet your mobilization goals. And I think in European campaigning, it's much more about creating awareness and attention in the first place. And since we have a very strict regulation when it comes to campaign funding and campaign fundraising and the entire need for money in politics. Therefore, most of, let's say, our professional time is spent on creating the public image of the candidate, but also in terms of rallying your party base and then trying to invent and come up with formats that ultimately get you in a dialogue with the voters, dialogue with potential new communities, and ultimately, of course, as well, get out the vote. That's pretty similar. But to cut it short, I'd say the two major differences is that fundraising and list building and everything around that and mobilization is of much less importance than it is in the US in most campaigns.
Yeah, I think a big difference too is party discipline. So the role of the political party is much more significant in Europe than it is in the United States, because they are much more involved in messaging and in these parliamentary systems, right? It's all about who your leader is going to be and making them chancellor or prime minister, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. An important point, because if you kind of break with party lines, especially with the key messaging, you might even get excluded out of the party funding system, which I think in the US is probably kind of unthinkable. And even running, let's say, your own corporate identity, right? When it comes to coming up with your own social media stuff, it's kind of important, especially in the federal elections, that you stick with the party CI and don't create something completely out of the box. And all in all, you can definitely say that the main strategies are shaped much more by the campaign HQ of the parties. And if you compare it to the DNC or the RNC, where, of course, the focus is quite different than in European campaign HQs.
Yeah, for example, you probably, campaigns in Europe would not have their own logos in the way that they do in the United States. And,
although we see, of course, one big trend that, of course, the digitization of politics has also spread over Europe, of course, is the personalization, right? That candidates become more and more important and political parties tend to be less important. But one small anecdote I have in German politics, of course, the media is always reporting when the new campaigns are revealed. It's kind of odd because media, so television reporters, come together and the Secretary General of the party presents a poster, like an offline poster, and they show, look, this is our slogan, this is what it looks like. So it's kind of an anachronistic, old, ancient tradition that, of course, billboards are still by far, and that's compared to the US, where TV spending, of course, still remains by far the largest spending bracket in all campaigns in Europe, and especially in Germany. That's still the good old-fashioned traditional billboard you will see on the side of the road where your candidate smiles at you.
Right. And I will say that design does take a front seat in a lot of these campaigns. And I think the design in Europe is a much greater focus and as a result, more polished.
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree on that, and it's even to the point that you would say, where I know that in U.S. campaigns, a lot of focus is built around get out the vote.
Hmm.
It's also, of course, the internal focus, as you rightly said at the beginning, that you have the party members, which are different than, of course, like registered voters as Democrats or Republicans. That they need to, let's say, be motivated to really go out and push and yeah, rally for your candidate. So that often is an own focus theme of, let's say, mobilization tactics. So because the social demographics of the party members differ very much from the average social demographics of the overall general population.
And you touched on this a little bit, Yuri, but the biggest challenge I see, and this I guess the brick wall that I run into when I'm trying to help translate American style tactics to the rest of the world is you have GDPR in the EU. I just recently learned that it's got this other amazing name in German, which like it's one word. I won't try and say it, but you have to get explicit opt-in permission to receive marketing communications, and that applies to political campaigns as well. So how does that change digital campaigning in Europe?
Yeah. So for the drinking game, to all the listeners out there, if you can say Datenschutzgrundverordnung, you will definitely get a Jaeger bomb at the next bar. That's that's the German word for GDPR. We love to come up with fancy, complicated names. And yeah, as you said, I mean, it's gotten to the point that it's very tricky for campaigns to operate in a field where you can call yourself data driven. It's been very restricted. I mean, it's similar like in the US, of course, social media platforms have heavily regulated the usage of political ads on their platform, but also in terms of, let's say, external data, it's quite tricky because you need explicit consent from a voter or from a user, of course, to use their data for any kind of targeting perspective. So whenever you ask someone to sign up for a list, you need double opt-in authentication, and that often leads to the fact, of course, people sign up for something, but they just don't, confirm that what they've just subscribed to, and that leads to the fact, of course, that personalized messages in campaigns or in-app community engagement is very low, and there are just a couple of, let's say, best practices in Europe from parties that have managed to create either an in-app community that managed to be built offsite Facebook or others. And if you go to the platforms, I mean, if you talk about TikTok or LinkedIn, it's basically impossible to run any kind of personalized messaging due to GDPR regulations.
So just to give a really concrete example to our U.S. listeners, you can't take a voter file. If you were in Europe, you couldn't take a voter file, the list of registered voters, and then upload that to Facebook as a custom audience because you do not have those voters' explicit opt-in permission to use that data in that way. Is that right?
That is right. And if you actually would do that or anything close to that, I mean, we don't have the concept of a voter file in a US sense. Of course, you have, let's say, microdata in terms of social demographics of very narrowed down villages or cities, but not like down to the street level where you say, look, this is where someone lives who voted Democrat or voted Republican. We don't have that due to our history, of course. Germany is very restrictive by far in Europe in terms of usage of personalized data in politics. So you can't do that, and you even, let's say, can't, just use data or personalized data points. Like if I would have your smartphone data and I would like to upload it, I would need to your explicit consent that I would use your data in order to create a personalized message. So you need to give your explicit consent in every time, and therefore most parties actually, just don't do that because it's way too complicated to adapt always the new consent regulations. And so, our focus is much more on general overall brand and narrative building than personalized micro targeting.
Got it. So your digital campaigns are designed to just reach everyone. You wouldn't have specific messages for specific audiences.
I mean, of course, there's a specific like running, for instance, ads or messages targeted to people that have potentially a background in non-German mother language or
Mm.
like of course young first-time voters and so on. But that's about it. It's more the raw, rough, larger brackets of social demographics and not tailored down any kind of psychographic modeling, which of course also the whole narrative of Cambridge Analytica, rightly so, played a huge role in Germany by condemning any kind of, let's say, psychographic use that might be misused in a context that people just simply don't know what kind of data is being used to tailor a message around their hidden desires or needs.
Right, and I do see here in the United States we have in California sort of a GDPR light, and I think you're going to continue to see this shift happen in the United States. Unclear if it's also going to affect politics or just commercial, but certainly the platforms are enforcing some changes as well. I want to shift back, Yuri,
Yeah.
to the U.S. midterms and having watched those from abroad. What has been your biggest takeaway of something you'd like to try on your campaigns?
So I think what one thing that definitely, for American listeners and for those potentially looking to do business in Europe, kind of has changed is that European campaigners, when we look to the US, is definitely that we look very interested towards the creative approach of creating new formats in terms of creating dialogues and potentially, of course, attention on all kinds of platforms, drawing people to the programs or the candidate. But the overall message has become, of course, much more polarized and much more hysterical in terms of language, potentially in both sides, I would say, where most people say, look, this kind of style of politics, where in the Obama times in the past years, it was always, wow, cutting edge technology, fantastic campaign ads and videos. And for this time, most people say, look, this kind of hyper polarized political debate, we don't want to have that in Europe, simply also because of the fact, as you rightly said at the beginning, we are not a two-party system. We have multipolar, multi-party parliamentary systems, and therefore political parties at the end of the election are required to get back on the table,
Right.
negotiate a deal, and actually manage to get into a coalition. How are you supposed to do that if you call your political opponent an enemy of the people, or something where they would say they definitely don't come back? And in short, I think this time in the midterms, it was very interesting to see how candidates also on smaller tickets managed to create a lot of creative content with small budget. I mean, there are a lot of good examples, where I think it was very interesting to see how they used social in order to create attention and to get out the word. But in terms of, I would say, technological innovation, there wasn't much where you would say, this is definitely going to be groundbreaking this or next year in Europe, and what we can draw from that.
Right. And so you touched on this a little bit. A lot of our listeners will be wondering about what's next, right? As our midterms are over, but just wait around for a little bit because the presidential election is about to kick off. But I know a lot of listeners are interested in working internationally, and so I'm curious to hear what other advice do you have for U.S. political entrepreneurs who are looking to expand their reach globally?
Yeah. So one thing I can say is I think the most important thing is don't just come over with the parachute to jump down and try to implement what worked in the US and say, look, this is going to be happening here. That I think won't work. But I do say that I think what's mostly appreciated that everyone knows American campaign professionals are very hardworking, and they really cut down to the chase what's needed and what's required in terms of capacity building to actually execute a campaign. And I think that's one advice, in terms of overall business opportunities, especially in Europe, that most campaign HQs in terms of political parties, but also other potential larger civic movements, like if you're on the progressive side, like labor unions are still a huge thing in Europe, and are definitely, in terms of their spending and in terms of their mobilization ability, a big player. Um, it all comes down then to the point: are you able to support with your consulting or with your tech or whatever special campaign ability you might bring to improve and scale the output efficiency in messaging and narrative shaping, but also in skills of the political parties. And that's where I think is definitely a huge sweet spot for any campaign professional that is able to understand and shape the logic of a multi-party system, where, of course, as again said earlier, not the main focus is email list building, but it's more about the creative aspect of content and also the ability to build organizational capabilities that shape and are adjusted to the digitization of political communications. And I think that will be a huge focus, at least what we see with our clients, but across Europe, that is going to increase in the coming months and years, because the boomers are about to retire and a new generation of political operatives in parliaments,
Yeah,
politicians.
maybe in Europe, but we're going to have the boomers for a while in the United States.
at
In
least,
politics.
we see a younger generation taking over the parliaments now across many spheres, and I think they are much more open to digital innovation and new approaches than the previous one.
You're listening to the Business of Politics show. I'm speaking with Juri Schnöller, co-founder of Cosmonauts and Kings. You founded Cosmonauts and Kings, which is a great name, and I'll let you tell the story about that, back in 2016 as Germany's first digital political communications agency. What was your biggest hurdle there for convincing the parties, the stakeholders, that this was worth investing their time and resources into?
Honestly, looking back, it's hard to imagine for an American listener, of course, but when we started in 2016, there was nearly no organization that spent a vast amount of their budget towards digital. Most social channels were still run by junior professionals, or if they were run, they were all the same. So no specific platform messaging. So you use the same for Facebook, for Instagram, for whatever you had. There was no really custom messaging towards specific target groups. When we get in, it was hard to convince people, of course. But then Trump happened, the election, the UK had Brexit, and populist movements were gaining traction all over Europe. And suddenly, of course, the question came back, okay, what is this new digital battlefield of persuasion and shaping minds in the public arena? And then more and more, let's say, organizations started to realize, okay, we need to invest in capabilities, and we need to invest in building platforms that actually are able to reach and persuade people. And that just took some time to make those people aware that this is a change that's not going back to the old-fashioned way of communication.
And now 8 years on, it's going well?
Yeah, we are now 60 people. As you said, we're the market leader in digital political communication. Of course, there are various social media agencies and agencies that do a large chunk of political communication and are larger than us. But we only do digital politics communication in the public sphere and do nothing else. And that's what we're very proud of. We're independent. We don't belong to any agency network. We're able to pursue our mission to support also smaller organizations, NGOs, unions. We're nonpartisan. That's also what we're very proud of. So we do work with conservatives, with liberal, with progressives, with Greens, excluding the far right in Germany. And for us, that's very important, because we ultimately believe as long as we support and empower, let's say, democratic actors, that we help in building a democratic debate on social media that ultimately benefits, of course, the public discourse and getting the best results for voters to make their decisions.
You and I have worked together creating a lot of content over the years. Explain for our listeners how content marketing fits into your overall business strategy, because I think that's something that we don't do enough of here in the United States. And I just want to hear from you why it's so important and the results that you see from that.
So I think what's really important as a service provider is to showcase that you yourself have values, especially, as you know, we are operating in a field where I would say probably some sleazy car salesmen are lower than us, but not many jobs have probably a lower reputation than being a consultant in shady politics. Maybe politicians themselves, I would say, they probably have a lower overall reputation and job recognition. No, in all honesty, I think that it's really important, to demonstrate that we're not these kind of Cambridge Analytica shady data guys that try to manipulate the public, but that we also do have a value-based, position that is really important for us to pick clients and to demonstrate it outside. So what we do with our content strategy, we organize and host events. Like tomorrow, for instance, we're having a large event at our office with some people from the German military talking about Russian disinformation, where we get a lot of people from the public sector, from business, and discuss what is needed to defend democracy in the digital sphere, and everything connected around our main narrative. Hosting events, more not just talking about us, but talking about the issues. I wrote a book called The Public Arena Playbook, where we try to empower especially smaller scale campaigns and candidates that run for office with the tools they need to execute digital campaigns, but they could never afford to hire an agency like us. So all that is connected to our main mission, and it's greatly appreciated because it helps you, and I think that's something for American listeners, not just talking about how great your product is, but talk about what solutions are needed in the field we operate in, and then potentially also bring other perspectives at the table, and that helps you becoming yourself a relevant actor in the market you're trying to shape.
Right. And one of those solutions that you've brought forward is Civical, which is a software platform that helps elected officials and candidates in Germany use social media more effectively. What have you learned from that process of building software? Because that's different than your agency work.
Yes, definitely. Like, we had the realization, especially in social media campaigning, that we needed something to help the individual candidate of a political party, because they usually are not able to use the Facebook Business Manager as well as potential specialists and campaign executives. And for us, that helped to create a tool that basically gives you the ability to save your favorite target groups for your constituency, for your election district, and then create content templates within a couple of clicks. Make yourself a quote, and that you can adapt to the overall CI, which we mentioned earlier is really important and crucial to the political party.
I'm sorry, what was that acronym again? CI?
Corporate identity. Just
corporate identity. Okay, that's not something we talk about much.
Oh, see, that's a good. Yeah. No, so overall, just adapting to the what let's say party identity visuals, and and for us, of course, there was a huge challenge. We also had support, of course, from an external developing agency, because as a digital agency, you have the problem of the innovator's dilemma. That, of course, creating a tool all by yourself is hardly doable when you're focused every day on servicing your clients. So we needed to create a completely separate innovation stream with externals that helped us shaping that. We kind of then founded our own company around it, Civical. And it's been used now by over 800 politicians in Germany. And that showed us that there was a specific need. We're still working out, of course, how to monetize it properly, because, again, there's not a lot of money, especially on the smaller tickets in races in Germany. But I'm very confident that by next year we'll be on a good track to develop it further.
Well, what else could American campaigners learn from our European counterparts?
That's a good point. I would say, that overall it's worth looking to Europe when it comes to, as you said earlier, to the overall visual identity and the usage of dialogue formats in voter contact. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in Scandinavia. Sweden is a great example. Parties are pretty advanced. Macron with En Marche is using great storytelling and great narrative building, but even on smaller and local, MPs, candidates, but also mayors. If you take the mayor of London or of Poland, Rafał Trzaskowski, there is loads of people that are really using social media in a very innovative way. And I think when I look to the pages of most senators and Congress people, there's still a lot of innovation potential for that. So I would say for any campaign professional, if you have the time and the ability from time to time, check out, like for instance, in Denmark, we just had elections yesterday. Even if you don't speak the language, honestly, just scroll through the feeds of the parties. you will see a lot of interesting stuff that can be easily adapted and that can be easily copied. And because since that is the main focus of most of our work anyways, creating potential dialogue formats, I think that's something you definitely can look into. And secondly, also the way our party system tries to find compromise. And one thing that I found astonishing was just in a Danish election that I saw candidates of rival parties discussing on their own Facebook channel and on their own Instagram channel with a candidate from the other side. And I think all kind of formats that enable for US listeners to bridge not party gaps at the end who you're voting for, but potentially seeing, look, we're all the citizens in the same country, and we need to work together no matter the outcome of the election.
I'd like to thank Juri for joining us today for a great conversation. You can learn more about him at his website, and I'll also link to Cosmonauts and Kings and Civical in our show notes. If this episode made you a little bit smarter or gave you something to think about, all that we ask is that you share it with a friend or colleague, and the bonus for you is that you look smart in the process as well. So remember to subscribe to the Business of Politics show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also sign up at businessofpoliticspodcast.com to get email updates from the show. And with that, I'll say thank you, and we'll see you next time.